is Arif Halaby on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. Hey, welcome back to the show, Total Financial Solutions, Safer Money Hour. Arif Halaby and Jeff Gerard. We're talking to John Sculley, CEO, former CEO of Apple Computer, and one of my most favorite is PepsiCo. John, the hardest part in life is to transition from one career field to another. But you did it, I don't know about seamlessly, because we didn't know behind the scenes, but you seem to have done it with rather ease, going from Pepsi over to Apple. Different technology companies from consumer goods. What was the common denominator? Why did that work for you?
Well, the common denominator for me, Alice, was that I'd been given the job in the 1970s at Pepsi to launch the international snack food business. Pepsi had acquired a company called Frito-Lay, and they were a U.S.-only company. And my job was to expand snack foods across the world. The big challenge was that all the profit in snack foods came from corn, not from potatoes. And corn in the rest of the world outside the U.S. was what you fed to animals. So our marketing job was, how do we convince people around the world that they should eat snacks made from corn and actually pay us for that privilege when they thought it was animal feed? So taking on an entrepreneurial task like that, which seemed monumental to us at the time, gave me a lot of courage that I could step into an industry where there were a lot of unknowns, and as there were talented people who were really excited about what they were trying to do, and our timing was good, we could actually maybe build something much, much bigger than anything we ever built at Pepsi, and it turned out to be true.
Well, adaptive corporations is something that you focus in your book, Moonshot, and this was an example, if you will, of how Howard Schultz built Starbucks into one of the largest and most really successful coffee houses in the world. Tell me about an adaptive corporation. What does that mean? And how does that work for us, for small business owners that may not ever have a billion-dollar business, but we want to have a $10 or $20 million business? How do we adapt that to our mindset?
Well, let me start with the Howard Schultz story, because it's a great story. He's one of America's truly great entrepreneurs. And he had turned over the management of Starbucks some years ago to an outside professional manager, and they kept adding more and more stores, and everywhere you turn, there was a Starbucks. The challenge was that the quality of the experience deteriorated as they expanded the number of stores. They took their eye off of the customer. And when he came back and took over the reins of his company again, what did he do? But he said, we've got to adapt to what our customers want, and they want a great experience, because we charge a lot of money for our coffee. As you know, Starbucks is a premium price coffee. And so he worked really hard to improve the quality of the experience inside a Starbucks restaurant. He was a lot more careful where they added restaurants relative to other stores in the Starbucks system. And he revived the company, and it's been wildly successful, and he's did it by being an adaptive innovator, adapting to what the customers wanted.
And the way you find that out in the next phase, the next disruptive element, which is healthcare, is how? How do we know that? It's a product that everybody has to use.
Yeah, let me give you an example, because healthcare is such a big challenge for the U.S. and relying on politicians to help us innovate in healthcare is kind of ridiculous, because politicians are good at debating. They're good at promoting certain special interests so they can get elected or get money for their campaigns. But the reality is they aren't innovators. They don't build anything. And so when you look at healthcare, we spend as a country $3 trillion out of a $15 trillion gross domestic product. So that's about 20% of our spend goes into healthcare. Wow. And the reality is it's just not sustainable.
No.
And so you say, so what can we do about it? Well, one of the things we can do something about is we can begin to shift the accountability, the responsibility to the customer, to the patient. And we can give them better tools to know what things cost. We can give them better choices than the high deductibles where they have to pay out of pocket and they're suddenly aware of how expensive healthcare is. And we can do it with telehealth. And so I'm part of a company called MD Live. We're one of the largest telehealth companies in the U.S., and we work with 800 hospitals, and we're building out in Walgreens drugstores all across the country, and we have very broadly available telehealth services where someone can actually get a certified doctor on the phone or over video conference. In a matter of a few minutes, the doctor can assess, what your needs are. They have the ability to write a prescription. And if you have the flu, you have an earache, you have sinusitis, whatever the low acuity care condition is, it can be dealt with, and for a fraction of the cost and very, very immediate service instead of waiting for 3 weeks to get a doctor's appointment. So it's an example of how you can revolutionize healthcare, much as the personal computer, revolutionized work productivity.
John, across the board, there have been examples of companies that have put in a franchise model that has been proven it works, it's done, whether that's a 7-Eleven store, whether that is a Dunkin' Donuts, and of course Starbucks. And you look across the board. We came up with a plan, probably 7 or 8 years ago now, that said if every one of these little corner, I don't know if you're familiar with in the Southern California area, that we started with those little mini market corner shopping centers. We had a nail salon, you had a yogurt store, you had a liquor store, and a dry cleaner. Those were pretty much your stalwart, and then occasionally there'd be something else in there. And today, of course, they're everywhere. But what we saw with that is you could put in a little 1,000 or 1,200 square foot every other block, every fourth block. You have third-year medical students. You might have a physician assistant or a nurse practitioner, and that can provide the mini urgent cares that are in every single community and alleviate the hospitals. I sit on the board at Providence, Holy Cross. Providence is one of the largest chains and employers in LA County. And on the board of healthcare, the costs that come through there, through the emergency room for uninsured or underinsured people, is just enormous. Depending on the population you serve, it can be nearly bankrupt an organization. So we see those, and since there's existing like Walmart or Walgreens or CVS, those kinds of facilities, it's fascinating to me that it can exist that way.
Yeah, well, you've explained it extremely well, and it's a great idea. It's called walk-in urgent care centers. We did some research on this about 3 years ago, and we were astounded, Aris, to find out that 24% of the population had been to one of these walk-in urgent care centers, exactly as you described, twice in the last 12 months. And we said, wow, that's bigger than the number of people who use iPads. And we said, that's a pretty good example that there is a service out there that people will use if you make it available to them. But here's the interesting thing. Why aren't there any big national brands of walk-in urgent care centers like there are Starbucks coffee shops or there are McDonald's restaurants? And the answer is that people tend to look at these as very local branded services. It's almost like your local dry cleaner. There is no nationwide dry cleaner. So there's a huge opportunity, and maybe Providence Systems will be one of the real innovators here, to begin to build out a service that can be replicated in much larger scale, so that when you walk into a Starbucks, it's always going to be the same. You kind of know what the experience is like if you're a Starbucks user. It ought to be the same for the walk-in urgent care centers. The quality of the customer experience should be exceptional no matter which one you walk into. And I think you're going to see, more and more of them built. They're going to get better and better. And they're going to eventually be national brands, just as there are fast food restaurants.
Yes.
And they will alleviate, exactly as you said, a lot of the burden of the high-cost hospital system.
Folks, when we come back, we're going to continue with John Sculley, the author of a book, Moonshot. Very well written and worth the read, folks. Moonshot is one of my favorite books. It's as of today, as I'm reading it, it's learning. You're learning a little bit about, not today, not the past, but the future. You're an entrepreneur. You're a small business owner that has an idea of a business model that is in technology. Moonshot might be the book for you. We come back, John. I want to touch on education, the next disruptive move, if you will, when it comes to the future of technology and others. When we come back, Total Financial Solutions, Safer Money Hour. I'm Arif Halaby on AM 1220 KHTS. Hey, welcome back to the show, Total Financial Solutions, Safer Money Hour. Arif Halaby and Jeff Gerard. We're talking to John Sculley, the author of Moonshot, former CEO of Apple Computer and or Apple products, as well as PepsiCo products back in the, was it in the 70s and 80s, John? When you're part of Pepsi?
Back in the 70s and 80s.
Okay, very good. John, your book Moonshot talks about some of the future changes, if you will, and they're happening now. We talked about healthcare, but education seems to be a big change. Our listeners know a little bit about my background. I'll fill you in, and for those that are just learning, we kind of retired at an early age, pulled the kids out of school, hung out, and traveled quite a bit. So my kids have been homeschooled since my oldest was in the second grade, and my youngest has never been into a regular school. My daughter is in the middle there, and she did kindergarten. But altogether, my oldest was 19, earned his bachelor's degree. My daughter is 17. She'll have her bachelor's by the time she's 18. My youngest will probably be right around that same age as well. And I share that with you because homeschooling, using the internet to take classes from the University of Oregon, or if they were taking classes from Nevada, right here in California, as well as traditional walk-in to the community college or now the four-year university for my older two. Part of the challenge, I think, is we have built trillions of dollars in debt specifically to fund these huge brick-and-mortar teacher-led but almost never show up type of undergrad courses where you have tenure and sabbaticals and a system that is so archaic, in my opinion. I don't know if we can continue. You're saying education is the next big disruptor. Tell me about that.
Well, it's so much fun listening to you and talking with you, Aris, because you have such a great set of experiences, and I'm learning a lot, particularly in this last couple of minutes as you talk about how you homeschooled your kids. I think of it this way. When I went to school, and I bet it's true for many of our listeners, the focus was on the answers, about remembering things, memorization. But guess what?
Yes.
The answers all come for free today.
That's
the answers are called Wikipedia, it's called Google.
Yes.
So the real focus on education should be on the questions, not the answers. So how do you know which questions to ask? Well, you have to have curiosity, and you have to have some sort of leading you to the good stuff, and that's what online education is able to do. So it is possible. The technology is not the obstacle. It is possible for people to get more and more of the learning. Remember, the thing which we really need to think about is how do you help kids know how to learn? I remember when I was at school, I said, gee, I wish there was a course that would teach me how to be a better learner.
Wow.
I don't need to have someone to teach me how to memorize facts better. I need someone to say, so here's are the little hints, the methodologies for better learning. So when you think about better learning and you think about asking the right questions and you think about the ability of technology to lead you to almost anything, if you have the curiosity and maybe a little help to point you in the right direction, you can see how the whole field of education can be different than what we have today. And what is our K-12 education system? Well, it's largely teachers' unions who are trying to protect jobs, protect pay scales. They're trying to do things that aren't necessarily about education at all. And so when you get to the university level, we're already seeing, as you point out, that the higher education courses that are available online are getting pretty darn good. Many of them, in fact, are free.
Yeah, it's incredible to me.
Your degree for these free courses, but
that's
you're
right.
learning a lot for it. So I agree with you. I mean, this is ripe for revolution. The problem is there are so many cultural obstacles, so many special interests that are going to do everything they can to resist the change.
You know, one of the big unions here in the Southern California area is the United Teachers of Los Angeles, UTLA. They do an amazing job protecting their members. And during one of the union negotiations, one of the leaders came before the news media and said, look, if kids paid our union dues, we would be protecting the kids and working for them. It was incredible. It was caught on tape. Of course, it played very, very briefly, but it's out there. They said, but teachers do, so we're protecting the teachers. It's incredible how somebody can hear that and believe that the current system is what we should be moving forward with. I'll give you a good example. One of the big arguments I remember as a kid, my parents having, I was probably 7 or 8 years old, was how my mom spent probably at the time 50 or 150, I don't know, on encyclopedias. The person would come knocking on the door. Hi, I'm here to sell you encyclopedias. And, my dad was at work. My mom bought them, had to make payments for us 4 children. And every single time we had a question, the answer was, say, Mom, how did it? It's say, son, go look it up. Today, I'm sitting with or over the weekend, I'm sitting with my kids at a restaurant. And one of them had a question about something. Before the question was sitting on the table literally for any seconds. 2 of my kids were on their smartphones and they had the answer. It is no longer about that.
It's a great question, and here's something which I find fascinating. Many of your listeners have probably heard of Jack Welch. He was the legendary CEO of GE. And he went on to start the Jack Welch Institute. It's really an online business school program. Well, guess what the basic methodology is? Instead of having the teachers test the students, he has the students grade the teachers. And if the students say that their online is an online school, higher education, university level.
Yes, I know it well.
If the students say the courses aren't good enough or the teaching of the professors isn't good enough, then guess what? The teacher gets fired. So it completely reverses the role to say, let's focus on the customer. Now here's something I've always wondered. People say, well, why do we have to spend so much money on the government? And as you think about it, I say, well, maybe we could justify spending money at a government level if they were competent. But there's no accountability in the federal government anyway. People don't feel any responsibility for what they do. And nobody focuses on the customer. The customer is the voter. Imagine if students were treated like customers, just like Jack Welch Institute. Imagine if the federal government, when you walked into the Motor Vehicle Bureau, they treated you like a customer, like a voter, like they worked for you, instead of you feeling like, gee, I hope they'll give me a little bit of time before they shut the window down.
Yeah, isn't that funny how you see?
Start getting people to think about things entirely differently, because technology enables us to do things entirely differently and put the customer at the center of everything. And that's what Moonshot's all about.
I love the book, Moonshot. John, we're going to take a quick break. It's 90 seconds, folks. We'll be right back. We're going to finish up with this hour of the program. John Sculley, the author of Moonshot. John, I want you to simmer on this. What foreign country do you think is going to be the next big explosion economically when we come back? Total Financial Solutions, Save for Money Hour, your entrepreneurial headquarters. This hour of the program, John Sculley, author of Moonshot. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back to the program. Joining us this final few minutes, we have special guest John Sculley. This hour of the program, we've been talking about his book, Moonshot. An opportunity for you to learn, especially as an entrepreneur, the thinking of what a billion-dollar business is all about. John, we went to break and we were talking about maybe one foreign country that you think just might be the next place, maybe for us right here in the LA area, to sell our products to in the future.
Well, let me put it in the context. I'm still very optimistic about the U.S. Future, but most of the world's growth is coming from the emerging markets. About 80% of the world's GDP, gross domestic product, is coming from emerging markets. These are countries in Asia, in Africa, in parts of the world where they may not have things that we take for granted yet. Here's an interesting fact, that a few years ago, China was the fastest growing market for things like smartphones. Mm-hmm. And yet they grew so fast that China is as saturated with smartphones today as the United States is. Over 95% of the people have a smartphone today. Wow. So it's just a replacement market. So where's the next growth coming from? India. India is now where everybody is focusing. India is 1.3 billion people compared to China, 1.4 billion. And even if you get only 300 million of those people, buying consumer products.
That's the entire United States.
It's a huge, huge market.
That's enormous. John, one of the most important things I think in life is to leave a legacy, whether it's for your children, whether it's for your friends, your family, a business. Tell me what kind of a legacy you hope to leave behind.
Well, I don't really have any interest in leaving a business legacy. My sense is that you try to pass on what you know to other people, and you can do that best by writing books, by talking to people, as we're doing over the air now, or small conversations or mentoring people. The things that are more important is the values that you leave that are carried on by your heirs, by the next generation and the generation after them. So I think it's all about stories. I mean, stories are the best ways of communicating. For decades, many cultures didn't have reading and writing. and they passed on their culture by telling stories to the next generation. So I'm a big believer in telling stories about real things and lessons learned, particularly mistakes, because you learn most from your mistakes, not from your successes.
Yeah, I'm with you, John. One of the most important things in my life, I tell my children, is that failure is a big part of success. In fact, not only is it necessary, but it should be expected as part of the pathway in order to even be there. When success comes, you have to have gone through failure. It's a big part of life. I appreciate everything you've done for both the consumer goods. Pepsi's not a bad product. I'll take it. And also, of course, Apple. You've been part of witness to history, of certainly a big influence in our future as well. Thanks so much for all you do. Folks, John Sculley, thanks for joining us, sir.
Thank you, Aris. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
We appreciate it. John Sculley, the author of Moonshot. Folks, you can go to Amazon. You can go to barnesandnoble.com. You can almost go anywhere. The book is out there. What an amazing read. I love it because it tells you a little bit about the past, the future, and importantly, the present and how you can get involved in your entrepreneurial spirit. Thanks for joining us, folks. We'll be back after the top of the hour in our second hour of our program. Total Financial Solutions Safer Money Hour every week at this time. You can go to hometownstation.com, click on Total Financial Solutions. Come on over, check out some of our seminars that we have coming up as well. Arif, Halaby, and Jeff Gerard on your place for News Talk and Information, AM 1220, KHTS.